Welcome in, everybody, to the Fantasy Football Life Advice Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Barth, and we're going to talk about the Week 11 waiver wire. First and foremost, make sure down below, as you see, hit that subscribe button. Also, follow us on X and Instagram. We try to put our content out as often as possible. Right now, we're doing the waiver wire show every week. I'd like to start adding on a weekly matchup episode. We're building that. It's taking time. But we'll get right into this waiver wire show. We're going to talk about players that we've talked about a little bit in the past, but they're becoming a little more relevant as the season goes on. We'll talk about some new people. But first and foremost, we're going to talk about Trey Benson for the Arizona Cardinals. He looks like a legit player. It looks like what they drafted him to be, that replacement for Connor. 28% of the snaps 2 weeks ago, 27 this past week. 10 carries, 62 yards, 2 receptions for 25 yards this past week, and looks like he could jump right in for Connor if something happened there. And we know Connor's injury history, so this could work out well for the Cardinals. They have that backup, and the Arizona Cardinals offense is looking pretty legit right now. They have the weapons. Kyler Murray kind of looked like himself a little bit this past week, so we'll see if that can continue. Their schedule gets a little easier in the second half of the year, and we all know how this rookie second half of the year thing works out in fantasy. It's typically when rookies start to pick it up, and over the next 3 weeks, he's got a bye this week, so if you're picking him up off the waiver wires, just know you're not going to have him this week, but he has Seattle and Minnesota, and then playoff schedule, he has the Patriots, Carolina, and the Rams. So pretty solid schedule going forward. And like I said, something happens to Connor. We know that history. Know that Trey Benson could be a league winner going forward. Only 23% rostered in sleeper, so he's out there. Grab him if you need a running back. This next guy, Audric Estime. I talked about him last week as well. Sean Payton mentioned that he was going to give Estime more work, and he did. 14 carries, 53 yards. Doesn't look great, but they played one of the best run defenses this season in the Chiefs. And Peyton just came out today and said that he expects Estime to continue to get more work. So not quite as of a priority to me than Benson is, because I think Benson is going to dominate if he gets the workload that Connor is. But Estime is a easy flex option every week if he continues getting the work. As you can see, not a whole lot of work in the receiving game, but he got a bulk of the work this past week, and he stepped in as the number one back over Javonte Williams. It's worth a pickup. Throw him on your bench. I wouldn't start him right away, because who knows what is up Sean Payton's sleeve. He could throw Javonte out there and have him get a majority of the work again this week. But grab Estime, only 5% rostered in sleeper, in case you need that flex option down the stretch. Next guy, we watched Aaron Jones go down this past week with a rib cartilage injury. We'll be monitoring that, but Cam Akers filled right in. 13 carries, not a very good line there. Only 1 reception for 9 yards. The Minnesota Vikings offense in general did not look great this past week. Sam Darnold kind of showed flashes of the old New York Jets Sam Darnold. Hopefully that doesn't continue going that way. But Cam Akers could be a solid fill-in while Aaron Jones is out. I see him being that number one option in the backfield. We may see a little Ty Chandler sprinkled in there. But you want a piece of high-powered offense like this in Minnesota. So if Cam Akers is available there, grab him and throw him on your bench. See what happens. Keep an eye on the Aaron Jones situation. You may be able to flex him this week if Aaron Jones is out. But we haven't heard a whole lot of news on that quite yet. Next guy, Jaylen Warren, Pittsburgh Steelers. Same thing. Najee Harris went down with an ankle injury this past week. Came right back into the game, but Jaylen Warren got work. 14 carries for 66 yards, 2 receptions for 29 yards. And Jaylen Warren continues to show that efficiency that he has in the past, sharing work with Najee Harris. I don't see that changing very much, as Jaylen Warren, like Arthur Smith, has been known to use the back that you don't want him to use. So Jaylen Warren could continue getting this work, and if he continues to be as efficient as he has been, he's a solid flex play on a weekly basis. He's got a pretty solid schedule over the next few weeks: Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincinnati. But finishing out the season, championship game, you're not really going to want to. You're not going to really want to see him with the Chiefs in your championship game if you make it that far. But Warren, like I said, he's been solid in the past. Started out this year with some injuries, but this offense, they're going to try to shove it down your throat, and Warren could be that guy to kind of help you continue on throughout the season and make a playoff run. Last running back that I want to talk about today is Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards, a lot of hype, thought he was going to be the number one running back coming out of camp this year, but injuries, and J.K. Dobbins got his chance, and J.K. Dobbins capitalized. Dobbins, obviously, we talked about it with Vidal a little bit a few weeks ago, but Dobbins can't handle the workhorse numbers that he was getting due to the fact of his injury history. It's just you don't want to see that if you're a Dobbins owner. You don't want to see that if you're the Chargers. So with Edwards being back, you saw it first game back, 10 carries, 55 yards, solid performance. I don't see this changing. I mean, yes, he will be the number 2, but he's going to get some work. They're not going to force Dobbins to continue to carry the ball between 20 and 30 times a game. It's just not – you don't want to do that to these backs, either one of them really. They both have a questionable injury history, and you don't want to take the chance of watching one of them get injured. But with the way that they run this offense, Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh, they want to run the ball. They want to run the ball a lot. Even Justin Herbert had 9 carries this past week. So grab Gus Edwards. Like I said, all these guys, these running backs I'm giving you, could be solid flex options down the stretch here. So we'll move on into receivers. First one I'm going to talk about, Ricky Pearsall. So Ricky Pearsall, man, this dude looked the part this past week against the Bucs. Bucs secondary has been sketchy, questionable for a while now, so it doesn't surprise me. But even with Juwan Jennings returning, Ricky Pearsall got his. Six targets, 4 receptions, 73 yards, and a touchdown. Looked good on his route running. You wouldn't believe this guy got shot in the chest not too long ago. So Ricky Pearsall, I'd have no problem starting him most weeks, flexing him. Seattle, Green Bay, Buffalo over the next few weeks. Could be some high-powered games, a lot of throwing. Rams, Miami, Detroit, 3 more games down the stretch in the playoffs. 55% roster, so he's out there if you're in a bit of a smaller league. But he's playing a majority of the snaps over the past few weeks. And like I told you earlier with Trey Benson, we're in the second half of the year. These rookies start showing up. They're getting settled into these offenses, learning comfortable with the playbook, comfortable with the quarterbacks. So grab Ricky Pearsall. He could be a league winner down the stretch. Moving on, not as much of a priority to me. MVS, a huge game this past week. 3 receptions on 3 targets for 109 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't see this happening every week. I could see him being the number 1 receiver for the Saints because they don't have anybody else. So he's worth owning. He's only 2% rostered. He's pretty much available in almost every league. You're going to see people dump some fab on him, but just know he only got 3 targets. So is he going to produce 109 yards and 2 touchdowns on 3 targets every week? I would suspect this offense still runs through Kamara and Taysom Hill throughout the rest of the season. But MBS will get some work. Could be solid over certain games. He's got Cleveland this next week, and then he goes bye, and then the Rams. So solid playoff schedule. So if he does continue to get some work, if his targets pick up, the playoffs could be a solid place to have him. I wouldn't dump your fab on him because, like I said, if he continues to only get 2 to 3 targets a game, he's going to have games where you don't want him in your lineup. So grab him at your own risk. I wouldn't dump everything you got on him, but he's worth a little less than 10% of your fab probably to see what he's got over the next few weeks. Next up, Jalen Coker from the Carolina Panthers. I've been talking about these receivers from Carolina, and they're all kind of throw a decent game out here and there. Coker this past week, though, 8 targets, a solid number, only 3 receptions, 41 yards. And that's going to be this Carolina offense. Bryce Young still isn't a great quarterback. He's looked a little better since coming back, but I personally wouldn't bank on these wide receivers every week for bye week fillers. If you need somebody to throw in there in your lineup just to get through a bye week, that's where I would look at them. Leggett would obviously be my priority, but with Coker, just beware and keep an eye out for Adam Thielen. If Adam Thielen comes back, I think Coker obviously loses some targets and the value just goes down. He's only 13% rostered in Sleeper. He's on a bye week this coming week, so I would honestly suspect that we see Thielen back after the bye week. But keep an eye out on that and see if Coker's worth a grab there. Next up, John Metchie. So I know we're all expecting Nico Collins to come back this next week, but I think Metchie's going to be the number 3 target in this offense, and that this passing offense is going to get better when Nico jumps back in. So Metchie looked good this past week. The routes looked good. Made some solid catches. Got his first NFL touchdown. 5 receptions on 6 targets for 74 yards and a touchdown. It's a pretty solid performance. So 2% rostered. Grab him. Throw him on your bench and see what happens when Nico comes back. See if he's still getting some targets and see what it looks like with Nico back in that lineup. Next up, Adonai Mitchell is a decent pickup. However, remember Michael Pittman was out this past week. He's an option to pick him up and kind of see what happens with Pittman, see if he continues missing time. There was a threat of him missing time earlier in the season, and he toughed it out. I don't know if we're going to see a long-term kind of absence from him moving forward, but I would expect we see Pittman back soon, which really hurts Adonai Mitchell's value because Pierce is still there, Josh Downs, and Flacco at quarterback really hasn't looked that great. So I would temper expectations. I wouldn't really put a bid in on Adonai Mitchell. I'd put a claim in on him, but there wouldn't be a whole lot of fab getting spent here, if any at all. You could put it in there, see if you get him for free, and just see what happens. 17% rostered in Sleeper. And we're going to move on to tight ends. Tight ends, first guy, I talked a little bit about him last week, Mike Gesicki. So Mike Gesicki, with T. Higgins out, still looked great. Nine targets, only 4 receptions for 30 yards, but he's getting peppered with targets with T. Higgins out. And Eric All being out kind of helped his snap percentage. The week before, Gesicki only played 36% of the snaps. He played his highest snap percentage of the season this past week at 71%. With Eric All out, Mike Gesicki is probably going to be getting that 70% mark most weeks. 56% rostered in Sleeper. If T comes back, I mean, we could be looking at a drop in the targets a little bit, but I don't see him getting completely skunked on the targets. You're going to be probably looking at least 5-6 targets a week, which is a solid number for him, and it could turn into some touchdowns if he is targeted in the right areas. So that's why I'd focus on Gesicki this week. Next up, Ja'Tavion Sanders. So I should have talked a little bit about him last week, but I kind of missed out on him. Ja'Tavion Sanders has been a somewhat solid player over the past couple weeks. 2 weeks ago, five targets, 4 receptions, 87 yards. This past week, 2 targets, 2 receptions, but he had a touchdown. Solid numbers for a tight end. Sometimes you're not going to get those big blowout games like the Kelce's and the Mark Andrews and players like that. But Sanders is a good streaming option if you're looking for those players. Bye week this week, but it goes on Kansas City, which is a solid matchup, and then Tampa Bay, which is a solid matchup. So grab Ja'Tavion Sanders. He could continue blossoming as the season goes on. Last tight end I'm going to talk about is Dawson Knox. So Dawson Knox is a watch and see. Dalton Kincaid dealt with a bit of an injury this past week, knee injury. Came back in the game. But if Dalton Kincaid misses any time, Dawson Knox could be a great add and a great play on a week-to-week basis. Josh Allen likes him. Not afraid to target him. So that's pretty much all what I have on Dawson Knox. It's really just a wait and see with Dalton Kincaid and how that injury goes. We'll move on to the quarterbacks. Justin Herbert. I looked at his roster percentage when I was building this, and kind of blew my mind. He's only 55% rostered. I remember last year we were talking about Justin Herbert is one of the top quarterbacks in the draft. I know that was a big change this year. One for the coaching staff and the views they had on how things were going to be run. But Justin Herbert over the past 3 weeks has been pretty much QB1 all 3 weeks. And this past week, 9 carries, 32 yards, touchdown. Passing wasn't as big, but still almost 20 points. 20 points the week before, 24 the week before that. Justin Herbert looks like he's comfortable in this offense, and he looks like he's running it really well. Like I said, 55% rostered. Great matchups coming up: Cincinnati, Baltimore, Atlanta over the next 3 weeks. One tough matchup in the playoffs in Denver, but beyond that, looks a solid option. Could be a great fill-in for if somebody gets injured, or just a week-to-week starter, honestly, depending on who you have in your lineup now. But grab Justin Herbert, solid option. And then next I'll talk about Drake Maye. So I almost threw Bo Nix in here again, but I've talked about him for the past 2 weeks, and I figured everybody's probably sick of hearing me talk about Bo Nix. So I figured I'd talk about another rookie in Drake Maye. Drake May's been solid on the ground, 4 carries, 24 yards this past week, 8 carries for 95 yards the week before. Extremely solid fantasy option. Not scoring great numbers, but he's got the Rams and Miami, which blows my mind on what's happening in that game tonight. Turnovers all over the place. And Indianapolis over the next 3 weeks. So 3 pretty solid matchups going forward. If you need a streamer for the bye weeks, Drake Maye could be that guy. Grab him if you need him. I'll throw a couple defenses out there for the next couple of weeks. What I like to do with defenses is I like to look for ones that I can stream for 2 weeks, or I try to look a week out and jump on it before the waivers run for that week, because I don't want to be fighting for my defenses in the leagues I still play defenses with. But Miami's got Vegas and New England over the next 2 weeks. Miami looks pretty solid tonight against the Rams. So it could be a solid option against the Raiders and New England, with the Raiders' troubles they got going on. And then although I talked about Drake Maye, Miami could still have a decent game, and Miami still put up some decent numbers. Next up, the other defense I want to talk about is Houston. So Houston, 5 picks against Jared Goff last night, seemed to scheme to that game. But they got Dallas And then they got Tennessee over the next 2 weeks. So 2 solid matchup. Dallas is abysmal. They probably hit pretty much the bottom of the barrel. So Houston could be a solid option over the next couple weeks. That's what I got. I meant some honorable mentions. I mentioned Bo Nix again. Bo Nix is still only 44% roster. Blows my mind. Dude's a QB1 right now. I think he's QB9 overall. So some of you guys are playing quarterbacks that are outside of QB1 range, obviously for the upside with certain ones, but Bo Nix is putting up the QB1 numbers. So just keep an eye out there. And Tylan Wallace for Baltimore. So the reason I didn't put him on here, and there's going to be a lot of people running to pick him up after his big game this past week, is Deontay Johnson really hasn't been implemented into this offense yet. We're seeing the complaints from him and his camp with this cryptic tweet, they called it. The squeaky wheel gets the oil is what they say. And I see Deontay Johnson's probably going to be getting some targets this coming week. So Tylan Wallace is going up against Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Deontay Johnson, Mark Andrews. Like, there's so many targets in this offense. I just can't imagine spending fab on Tylan Wallace in hopes that he's going to run an 80-yard touchdown in every week. So just beware. Know that the options are there for Lamar Jackson, and Tylan Wallace probably isn't going to be – that's probably a one-off game for him for the rest of the season. But remember, hit that subscribe button. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Instagram. And we'll catch you guys.